Good morning, my name is Josh from CyclonesOZ, and here is your detailed forecast update for the 20th of March 2025. A lot to get through in today's forecast update. You can see plenty of rainfall still occurring up in far north Queensland under that convergent zone. There's plenty of heavy falls also in the past 24 hours that we need to report on, with peak rainfall accumulations at 454mm since 9am yesterday in the last 23 hours at the Cardwell Gap Alert weather station there, and widespread falls between 250 up to 350mm around the Ingham and the Halifax area through the Herbert River catchment. Some very significant rainfall accumulations overnight, and as you can see as this radar loop slowly loads in, there's just been that stagnant big band of rainfall that's been sitting here up in far north Queensland on that convergent zone, and as such some very significant rainfall accumulations have been reported. Major flooding is ongoing at the Halifax Alert right now. Major flooding is also expected at Trebon later on this morning. Just major flooding all round up in far north Queensland as well this morning. I mean, if we just take a look at how much rainfall has fallen, doesn't look like the radar imagery is going to load in here, but just the magnitude of rainfall that has fallen up here is typical for tropical stuff, but it certainly isn't stuff that we see every single day. So here's some webcam footage that we've been seeing out of some of the webcams up here. You can see just this is at Halifax here, just major flooding all around, the bridge completely submerged here, and these water levels as well pretty quick to rise as well. I mean, these water levels are relentless here, and we're having some pretty significant jumps in the water as well as we get through this morning. This is here at the Seymour River. You can see the webcam is also reporting some very significant water flooding over the road here, probably about 90 to 100 centimetres of water over the road, and again rapidly rising as well here at the Seymour River in Ingham South. Some significant rainfall accumulations have been the driver of this as well. Here's another look at an Ingham weather station, just some major flooding all around here. So again, I think it goes without saying here that, but up in far north Queensland, discretionary travel strongly advised against, and even emergency travel this morning is going to be extremely dangerous, and it's going to take a couple more hours for these floodwaters to ease off and clear out of far north Queensland. Whilst the rivers were very quick to rise, they are going to be quick to fall, but again, major flooding is still expected to continue, and over the next few hours is when we are expecting the worst of these flooding conditions up in far north Queensland. Keep in mind the flooding situation normally trails the rainfall situation by up to 6 to 12 hours, and considering the worst of the rainfall was actually falling only about 6 hours ago, we probably still have a couple more hours of some really significant flooding before these water levels begin to recede. But for the most part, the rainfall has begun to clear out of the Herbert River catchment, especially further upstream out towards Mount Garnett and Ravenshoe, and the rainfall is still lingering around the Halifax area, but again, it is beginning to clear out for good at this time. And the good news is it looks like the rainfall for the most part is going to ease off for the foreseeable future, whilst we are still seeing some heavy showers moving through into this North Queensland coastline around Townsville, and there are still some heavy and stagnant bands of rainfall situated offshore from far north Queensland, which will cause some problems to certain areas, especially down in towards the lower Burdekin basement, and then further downstream into the Mackay area. We could still be seeing some heavy rainfall over the next couple of days, but for the most part the rainfall is going to be clearing out, and this is what the forecast looks like over the next couple of days as well, which, mark my words, is a lot more pleasant than what we have been seeing over the last couple of days. So pushing this forward here, you can see just a few lingering showers and storms here and there from the eastern weather forecast model through tonight and into tomorrow afternoon as well. Showers and thunderstorms also possible throughout this weekend, but for the most part Saturday especially is going to be high and dry. A bit more rainfall will return. We might even see another tropical convergent zone on Sunday. It shouldn't be anywhere near as strong as what the ones that we've been seeing over the last couple of days have been, but again, just the chance of a little bit of that southeasterly flow mixing with that northerly winds around the far north Queensland area, of course converging around that Hinchbrook Island and that Cardwell sort of area, and those convergent zones are the main driver between the rainfall we've been seeing over the last couple of days. But it doesn't look like this one is going to be as strong, but normally when we do see a setup of this with southeasterly winds meeting along that monsoon trough or meeting some northeasterly winds, as a result we see some pretty significant rainfall accumulations. And whilst that does look like a possibility on the forecast for Sunday, only time will tell. Showers and thunderstorms continuing for far north Queensland's Cassowary Coast through Sunday and in towards Monday as well, and it looks like the showers will linger around far north Queensland's Cassowary Coast through Monday and Tuesday, but for the most part out of North Queensland they have cleared out until Wednesday. And then from Wednesday onwards it looks like we're going to have to deal with rainfall again for far north Queensland. If we zoom out and get a little bit of a bigger picture, we can see that there is some low pressure system stuff happening over in the Gulf of Carpentaria. We've got a very broad low pressure system rotating around a common centre in the interior parts of the Northern Territory, and this very broad low pressure system will be dragging in a lot of moisture through the Gulf of Carpentaria and out of the northwest, and that will collide with the Queensland's northeasterly or easterly wind flow, and as such we're seeing some significant rainfall develop on whatever convergent zone fires up there. Significant rainfall is expected expected as a result through Wednesday onwards, and you can see that significant rainfall is a possibility through Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Even out into the first couple of days of April, we're seeing rainfall as a significant chance between the 26th of March out to about the 1st of April, and some significant falls can be expected as a result. The chances of that tropical low then developing off the North Queensland coastline right now is not looking overly likely, but some of the forecast models have now kicked into gear with that. We've had the GFS calling for rumbles of activity from a broad low pressure system that may develop offshore from the North Queensland coastline into the last couple of days of March. The chances of that aren't exceedingly high at this point, but it certainly is a possibility and certainly something worth mentioning. And if we do get a tropical low developing off the Queensland coastline, depending on its proximity to the Queensland coastline, that'll have a major ramifications on how much rainfall we can expect. If it's close, we'll be expecting significant rainfall. If it's far away, we'll be expecting much less rainfall. But just with all of this in mind, some significant rainfall accumulations are possible, and you can see here 5-day rainfall accumulations from Wednesday out to Monday the 31st of March. You can see some really significant falls are now a possibility up here in far north Queensland as a result of this rainfall. So this week-long rainfall accumulations here starting on the 25th of March are some really significant falls, like I said, up around that 200 to 300 millimetre mark now on the forecast models. Now, normally 200 to 300 millimetres wouldn't even bat an eyelid up in far north Queensland, but considering we're talking about the possibility of this far out into the forecast modelling future, normally when we're talking about rainfall predictions about 7 days out into the future, the forecast models are just lowballing like nothing else, like someone on Facebook Marketplace, and the GFS forecast model here is also in the same boat here, significantly reduced rainfall accumulations from what we can expect there. Even the axis is also not really on board with it, but if we do start to see some convergent zones and some wind flows into the northeast corner of Queensland, especially around that Cardwell Gap sort of area between Cardwell down to about Rollingston, where we can see some extraordinary rainfall accumulations as we have seen overnight, then we're going to be talking about some pretty significant rainfall in the cards here. So still a lot of discrepancies out in the forecasting future here up in far north Queensland, certainly some stuff that we need to be ironing out over the next couple of days, and I won't have a definitive answer on this until probably about Saturday or Sunday this weekend, so stick around for the latest forecast updates on both Saturday and Sunday, and I'll have some definitive answers on what rainfall we can expect into next week. But certainly if we start to see some of the stuff develop in some trends that we've seen in the last couple of days develop around far north Queensland, we could be talking about another very significant week of rainfall up there. And just whilst we're talking about week-long rainfall accumulations in and around the Townsville area, over the last 3 days, rainfall accumulations have been up around that 600 to 700 millimetre mark in the Townsville area, might I add. This isn't in rural Townsville, this is in the Townsville city area, so some really significant rainfall accumulations there. Up around Rollingston and Paloma Dam, rainfall accumulations between 500 and 600 millimetres. Some personal weather station has picked up 800 millimetres up there, and that's a plausible mark as well. Some significant falls have certainly been reported up there, but under that convergent zone last night with 454 millimetres since 9 a.m. yesterday at the Cardwell Gap, alert has pushed rainfall accumulations over the last week to 1116 millimetres at Cardwell Gap, which is the second week this year where they've had more than 1,000 millimetres of rainfall. We had that 2,300 millimetres or so earlier on this year through January and February, and then a further 1,100 millimetres here. Cardwell is on for a 5,000 millimetre of rainfall this year, that's for sure. Some really significant rainfall accumulations already so far this wet season. They're well above their average annual total at some of these weather observation centres just because of the magnitude of these rainfall events that they've been seeing, and as such it is no surprise that the Herbert River right now is at a major flooding alert at the Halifax and rapidly rising as well. So again, just referring back to some of those webcam footages, which is rather shocking to be honest, some massive rainfall accumulations as such, and some really significant flooding is currently ongoing around the Bruce Highway and through Ingham as well. So again, discretionary travel highly advised against, and seek alternative routes if you are moving between southeast Queensland and far north Queensland, or even north Queensland and far north Queensland. Just give it a couple of days for these water levels to begin to recede off. Significant falls also expected across the Cape York Peninsula as well over the next 10 days. You can see rainfall accumulations expected to be very heavy across parts of the coastal parts of the Gulf of Carpentaria, and that is all driven by that tropical low activity, that monsoonal activity rather, that's forming in the Gulf of Carpentaria. Significant falls expected throughout the remainder of today. You can see on the satellite imagery already some big time thunderstorms beginning to develop here in the southeastern corner of the Gulf of Carpentaria. You can see in terms of the radar imagery as well some pretty heavy falls moving through the Mornington Island area. The rainfall shouldn't be that extreme, but we are still talking about rainfall accumulations over the next week up around that 400 millimetre mark along the Carpentaria coastline. Significant falls also expected from this weekend onwards into interior parts of the Northern Territory and also through parts of Queensland's western areas as well. You can see rainfall accumulations starting this weekend over the 10-day forecast period out through next week, expected to be up around that 300 to 400 millimetre mark, with slightly higher accumulations actually possible now on these forecast models. And what we're going to be seeing is just stagnant moisture developing on showers and thunderstorms through the heartland of the Northern Territory. So between a line of Wave Hill down through Tennant Creek and Canteen Creek, and then into the western half of the into the western half of Queensland rather. So including areas such as Mount Isa, Cloncurry, Julia Creek, and all of those locations into western Queensland as well, and even as far south as Birdsville and southwestern Queensland. Significant rainfall accumulations are a possibility, that's for sure, and you can see between major forecast models there are some very significant falls. Considering the remote location of this weather event here that's about to unfold, I'm not going to be covering it in depth in just one forecast update. I'm going to be giving brief updates on it day by day, so if this does concern you, check back every day and see what's developing in your area. For the remainder of this week and into this weekend, rainfall accumulations should be light. Still a couple of thunderstorms expected here and there, but for the most part, rainfall accumulations won't be anything significant. And then the really confusing aspect of the forecast is over in the west, where we do have tropical lows and tropical cyclones galore over in Western Australia. So already we have tropical low 25U, its official designation of 91S, developing here just towards the south, or the west-southwest of the Cocos-Keeling Islands. You can see the sun hasn't risen on this tropical cyclone's development or developmental stages yet, but it does have an exposed low-level centre, which means wind shear is belting at this tropical cyclone right now, or at least this tropical cyclone in formation. It doesn't look overly likely that this system here is going to get to tropical cyclone status. It certainly will need a miracle to get up towards robust tropical cyclone status, but over the next few days and into this weekend, it is expected to head steadily towards the southeast along that trough line there, slowly closer towards the West Australian coastline before being pushed away by another developing tropical cyclone offshore from the Pilbara coastline by around this weekend, and then by the looks of things, its stalling motion finally gets to it and this system then peters out, weakens off, and I think its remnant energy will then get dragged out either towards the west or sucked in to that stronger tropical cyclone that's expected to develop offshore from Western Australia. Again, when we're talking about the culmination of tropical cyclone energy, when two tropical cyclones do merge, the energy is not added mathematically, it's not a compounding effect, and normally these tropical cyclone cores, because the low pressures of tropical cyclones, regardless of how strong they are, they're still extremely strong and extremely powerful. They normally rip each other apart. So the Fujiwara effect, which is where these two tropical cyclones merge, it very rarely creates a stronger tropical cyclone, at least in the short term, and it normally just eats both systems out, especially when these tropical cyclones are, of course, in their formative stages. A Fujiwara interaction is normally very bad news for tropical cyclones and normally very good news for the coastline that these tropical cyclones are headed for. Anyways, pulling this forecast back to Sunday, we can know that 25U is not going to be a significant problem to the West Australian coastline, but this tropical low that we're expecting to develop just south of Indonesia and offshore from the West Australian coastline, you can see already some of the energy beginning to build here south of Bali, moving into the West Australian waters here. A very favourable environment lies ahead of this tropical cyclone as well. We're expecting it to slowly develop through the later parts of this weekend and into towards Monday and Tuesday, and then as we've been talking about for the last couple of days, it's going to head closer towards the Pilbara coastline. How close it goes is still quite a bit of uncertainty in regards to this system, but it looks like it is going to make a relatively close pass, probably within about 600 kilometres or so, and because it is likely to be a broad and messy system, some impacts are certainly expected between Monday out to about Friday of next week. The forecast still pretty uncertain with this system because we don't have a developed tropical low yet, so there's no point in making a specific forecast for this tropical cyclone yet until it actually does develop, and if it does go for the West Australian coastline, we're not going to know until this tropical low does actually properly develop and the forecast models know exactly what to be making sense of. But you can see through Tuesday and Wednesday skirting the WA coastline and then moving out into the graveyard by the looks of things by around Thursday the 27th of March. You can also see that the GFS is calling for a pretty powerful tropical cyclone of this, and I think that is because the GFS has it over out to sea for a little bit longer. You can see quickly developing through Tuesday and Wednesday, and it keeps it out to sea for a couple more days than what the Eastern Weather forecast does, just about 3 days out to sea, and as such it is able to intensify and then move into the West Australian coastline. Whilst this is a plausible situation here, this would call for a Category 3 strength landfall or close pass along Barrow Island and Onslow. It is exceedingly unlikely at this time and certainly would take some pretty significant development of this tropical low, especially considering how close it is to the land areas of Western Australia. So whilst this forecast is looking pretty straightforward, we are expecting a tropical low to develop and then head pretty much due south before rounding itself out just north of the WA coastline and heading out to sea, out to the graveyard. And whilst we could be seeing a bit of a tropical cyclone impact with some gale force winds briefly on Tuesday and Wednesday for the Pilbara coastline, and the possibility of some heavy showers and isolated periods of heavy rainfall as well through Monday out to about Wednesday, you can actually see some pretty significant falls possible on the forecast modelling here. If this system does actually go for a landfall, there will be some very significant rainfall accumulations, but it looks like anywhere between 25 up to about 75 millimetres is possible early next week on the Pilbara coastline. So again, the impacts of this system, whilst they do look possible, the rainfall here and the wind speeds, we just don't know yet. We need to wait and see what this system actually develops into over the next couple of days. It will take a couple more days for me to give a definitive answer on this for the West Australian coastline, but for those between Carnarvon up to Broome that have been looking at the forecast modelling over the last couple of days and seeing the trends of this becoming a tropical cyclone impact for your location, there's no need to panic and no need to begin preparations for this tropical system just yet. There isn't any threat to land, or any immediate threat to land, that's for sure. We will have to wait and see what actually happens here with this tropical cyclone. It could form, it might completely bust out, and we're only time will tell over the next couple of days. And just briefly pulling things back over towards North Queensland and then out to sea into the Coral Sea, like we have been talking about in the first part of this video, the chance of a tropical low is there as we get into the last couple of days of March. The major forecast modelling hasn't been too keen on it, but you can see the GFS expecting that trough to be really quite active, and we could be seeing a tropical low or two spin itself out from that. The chances of a tropical cyclone going for Queensland's coastline at any point, or even southeast Queensland, are very close to zero at this point. It looks like the trade winds are going to prevail in this situation here. Normally when we're talking about systems late into March and early into April, the trade winds do prevail. We get these systems forming over the Cape York Peninsula or into North or far North Queensland's coastline, and then they just get dragged down to the southeast and into the graveyard. And very rarely do we see systems get pushed around like we saw with Tropical Cyclone Alfred, where they make that line for the Queensland coastline. Not only is that very rare in general, but especially at this time of the year, and especially as we get into the first couple of days of April, the chances of a Queensland landfall fall dramatically off a cliff. Queensland landfalls in April are historic weather events, might I add. They're very rare to occur after the solstice, and just Queensland tropical cyclones in general as well really do fall off a cliff after the summer, after the, no, not the solstice. We get that transition from summer to winter over in the, with the, you know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm referring to here. My words are an absolute scramble this morning by the sounds of it. But yeah, after about the 22nd or the 23rd of March, historically speaking, tropical cyclone impact chances along Queensland fall off a cliff. And to make this a weather forecast instead of a tropical forecast, let's just talk about this cold front activity over in the Great Australian Bight. We have that strong cold front moving through, and that's going to give Tasmania a bit of a belting later on today by the looks of things. Some significant rainfall heading into the Eyre Peninsula right now. We might actually see a bit of a severe thunderstorm outbreak into the eastern half of South Australia and across much of Victoria as well later on this afternoon and evening. Temperatures certainly going to be warm enough. We're looking at a high 20-degree day across parts of Victoria and into the early 30s for parts of the northern Victoria as well, and convective available potential energy will also be there for a couple of thunderstorms to develop. We are heading into the second thunderstorm season where we see some of those stronger cold fronts at this time of the year develop some significant thunderstorms through New South Wales and Victoria, so we do need to remain vigilant, and tonight we might be seeing a couple of severe thunderstorms fire up here and there into the northern parts of Victoria, so we're talking locations north of Melbourne through Bendigo and Ballarat. And then later on tonight, like I said, that significant impact for Tasmania. We could be seeing some pretty strong winds and some moderate heavy rainfall later on this afternoon and into early this evening, and like I said, those wind gusts around that Mount Cyclone Island area could be up around that 100km/h mark, so again, pretty gusty indeed, and also pretty gusty across some of the southern tips of the Blue Mountains as well through Victoria and into the Kosciuszko Range around at New South Wales. Significant wind gusts are possible there, but like I said, with that severe thunderstorm chance, while it is a little bit difficult to call what thunderstorms we can expect at what point, we certainly could be seeing a line of some stronger thunderstorms developing later on this afternoon as this cold front moves through, especially into the northwestern corner of Victoria, and especially for locations around Bendigo and north of Ballarat. The chances of thunderstorm impacts for Melbourne looking pretty unlikely at this time, but we might see a strong cell or two move through the Geelong area. That's not unusual for this time of the year, and we might also see a couple of drops of rainfall for the Melbourne area as well. Certainly does look like a reasonably strong cold front for this time of the year, and you can already start to see some showery stuff beginning to develop into the northern parts of Victoria at this time. But yeah, that makes it, that little cold front take there makes it a well-rounded weather forecast for Australia. I do hope you've enjoyed the forecast update. Any feedback or suggestions, please do leave them in the comment section down below as well. A special shout out to the channel sponsors. Their names are on screen right now, and again, I could not run this show without them, and their support is much appreciated again. And a special shout out to all of the recent subscribers as well. If you haven't already, then please consider subscribing. More weather forecasts to come. But that is all from me today, and I'll catch you all in the next storm. Goodbye.